Wait a minute. That guy just shot lightning out of his eyes. He can't do that in the game. Well, maybe he can. Stick around, we'll find out. Hi folks, Old Man Grognard here, and today I was wanting to talk a little bit about style and tone in role-playing games. And I'm not talking about genres, I'm not talking about, how it emulates this or that, the other thing. What I want to talk about is how real is the game to the players and the game master. I kind of wanted to talk about, because I know some game masters like ultra realistic, others like more high fantasy or fantasy type things, and this applies across genres, across drama, because most dramas, no matter how realistic they are, it's all a what if. So what I did was I looked up the two words online in the Merriam-Webster dictionary, and this is what I got. Possible adjective: being within the limits of ability, capacity, or realization. B, being what may be conceived, be done, or occur according to nature, custom, or manners. C, being something that may or may not occur. D, being something that may not be true or actual. And E, having an indicated potential. Okay, that's possible. Here's probable. Probable adjective. A, supported by evidence strong enough to establish presumption but not proof, establishing a probability, and likely to be or become true or real. So what we have is possible, yes. Probable, it's more of a odds are type of situation. It's odds. Now, people who like things realistically, they'll go with the first definition, being within the limits of ability, capacity, or realization. Okay. Being what may be conceived, be done, or occur according to nature, custom, or manner. So basically they're following the rules of realism. I mean, it's physics. Things happen. And, there are certain things that are given, like gravity. And so that's their bailiwick. They like things real. Like if in an action game somebody shoots a gun, it's going to do a lot of hurt, realistically. Probable, on the other hand, there are other people who like it more of a what-if type situation or a high fantasy type situation, supported by evidence strong enough to establish presumption but not proof. Now, here's how you get to the probable with the possible. I can't remember who said it. I think it was Richard Matheson, talking about how he writes a Twilight Zone episode when he was writing for Twilight Zone. He said, I would take reality and put just a drop of fantasy in it and see what would happen. That's pretty much what you're doing. If you're not running an ultra-realistic game. Frankly, I find ultra-realistic games boring. But, some people, hey, that's their thing. So they're going by, this is going to happen because this is the way it happens in life. Boom, 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 boom. You get shot, you get hurt, you take a long time to recuperate. You fall, you break a leg, it's going to hurt and take a long time to recuperate. I'm using damage as an example. I mean, I keep coming back to gravity because, gravity's a constant. It's the constants in the world that work. That doesn't mean you can't tell an interesting story that way. There's a lot of movies that do, and documentaries and things like that. But the people who like to mix up probability with possibility, because you can go overboard the other way. If you're using all probable, then you're high fantasy and anything goes, and then, like Syndrome said, when everybody's special, nobody is. And it just kind of falls apart. So this is what you got to do. This is the dropping a drop of fantasy in reality, if you want to do it that way. Some people take like a whole bucket of fantasy and dump it in reality. What you have to do in your game is establish a ground rules. Because if you're doing an ultra-realistic game, that's fine. You have ground rules, you look out the window, read the paper, see the TV, read up on it. Do your research. Fine. But if you want to do something that's more probable, and there are certain genres like superheroes that run on this, you have to establish your ground rules. You have to establish your ground rules anyway for the realistic thing. That is doing your research. But if you're doing something like supers, or even something like pulp, Indiana Jones, and fantasy, D&D, you have to establish your ground rules. Now, D&D did a great job of establishing general ground rules. Every game system does that. But if you're going to deviate from that, you've got to make it clear that this is the way the world works. Now, I'm not saying you have to sit down with the players and say this is the way the world works at the first session, although that is a good idea. There are certain game masters who want players to find out for themselves. So the best way to do that, to me, would be front-loaded into the first session. Design a scenario where they could gradually work themselves into the world. Now, find out what the limitations of the world are. Now, if you have people who can fly and shoot lightning bolts out of their butt, or teleport, or something like that, you have to have your ground rules to back it up. Now, I'm not saying that you can't have something happen where the characters go, wait a minute, did that just happen? Can you do that? You don't have to explain yourself, as long as you know it in here. Because eventually they're going to learn it. If you've got ground rules and they're all in your head, and you never tell the players, they will figure it out to a certain extent, but they're not going to be happy about it. So you got to sort of work it along. So what you do, like I said, set the ground rules, tell them what to deviate from. Now, I'm going to go back to Dungeons and Dragons again, because that has the biggest ground rules I've ever seen for a game. And the funny thing is, you're supposed to, set up your own world to do whatever you want with it. But there are certain things that people, it's called tropes, of course. They expect certain tropes, but you got to tell them and figure out if you're going to deviate from that. What I mean is, they're all expecting, orcs, goblins, ogres, giants, dragons, blah, 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 blah. If you take out some of those races, you got to let them know. Or if you rename them, or things like that. My friend Matt, who did Mythgarther, says that they're right there in the book. He took a couple of classes and renamed them to since it's a Germanic Norse type Warhammer world, he renamed the mage and the cleric. But it still works out the same. Plus, he made the cleric more fighting cleric than cleric, because he took out the paladin. So the cleric pulls his weight more in the fighter category. That's his ground rule. That's the limitation. The limitations of the world. Because the limitations of the world can go a long way. You can totally change the whole thing, as long as you know what to do. Most shows nowadays, I'm not saying they didn't have back then, but most shows have what they call a show Bible, which is written by the creator or creators and the major writers who first work on it, to say, this is how it works, folks. These characters are like this is how the world works. So future writers and people who work on it, who come later, know, okay, these are the ground. So, say they never watched the show. Well, here's the Bible. Boom. And also, even if they've watched the show, sometimes there are nuances that writers cannot catch unless it's laid out for them. Certain ways characters work, certain way the world works that they didn't know about, because it's a backstory that either never comes up in the show, or they buried it so far that it's hard to catch. So that's possible versus probable. I go with a medium dose of probable. My friend Matt, he goes with really as realistic as you can get with a world that has magic in it. And because he's very much influenced by Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. So that gives you you say that to somebody who's played that gives him kind of idea what the ground rules are then. So establish those ground rules in your head or whatever. Decide what you do and don't want, what will and won't work, things like that. And then you can add the probable, because probable is, hey, what's going to happen? It could happen. There's million to one shot, but something could happen, So that's my little essay on probable versus possible and how they can mix together. If you got any opinions on this or anything else for that matter, you can always get a hold of me at oldmangrognard@gmail.com. So until next time, bye-bye.